Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have a great show coming your way today on GoJo and Golic. So, Marshall Newhouse going to stop by, preview the Monday Night Football doubleheader. Can't wait to have him on. Plus, finals controversy. The WNBA facing, I can't think of another word for it. Controversy. It's Monday morning about how the championship went down. We will get into all of that. Plus, what it all means. We will give you a full Week 7 recap. All that and more coming up on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here. We're presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal, and we got a great show coming up, as always. Download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, on the DraftKings Network. I think we're all a little off this morning right now as we get ready to recap Week 7 in the NFL because, as Jesse mentioned, there was a lot that went on here. The thing we all expected, probably, the Kansas City Chiefs, your last remaining undefeated team in the NFL, how they got here may be a little different than what we expected, and the fact that they just narrowly edged out the Minnesota Vikings led by Sam Darnold does seem a little bit curious, but we've got a lot going on there. The WNBA Finals finishes up. The Major League Baseball World Series now set as the Yankees and the Dodgers are going to get ready to play here, and my dad just drove across the country, so I'm concerned about him coming off that drive from South Bend to Arizona, and Jessie had to pull a tick off herself and now fears the worst. So everyone's a little bit rattled here this morning. Let's start with you, Dad, and do a checkup after your long drive. How you feeling, bud?
Actually, the drive went well. Me and your mother and the 3 dogs, it went surprisingly well. We had unbridled energy, as Jim Harbaugh would say. We entered the day with unbridled energy. And we made the drive great. And then I had to hook up everything. That's the question. Being on air the day after I travel with this entire setup and try and hook it up. I try and not only unplug like a few things, so I only have to plug in a few things. And I plugged in everything right, but the internet at the house here was being a problem. Your mother actually saved the day. I needed a little piece. A tiny piece, a little connector piece that I didn't have, and she went out. We were while the trip went well, we were exhausted, and she went out into the night. To find this piece, and that is the only reason I am on air. After all this equipment, if I could show you the equipment, I would, but I'm not turning the camera. I'm not touching anything. It came down to one piece, 2 inches long. That's it. That's the reason I'm on air this morning, and your mother is the champion.
There's a joke about 2 inches somewhere in the midst of this, but the idea that my mom would be the winner in tech support is the least surprising outcome of all of this, Dad. The fact that you got there and got all this there in one piece, because again, for anyone unsure of the scenario here, it's my dad, my mom, and 3 dogs in a Sprinter van going from South Bend to Arizona. So this is a straight out of a sitcom idea, and my dad having to transport a bunch of tech equipment as a 61-year-old man who routinely has to ask the rest of us for the Netflix password on his own account. So this is against all odds that he's gotten here. And then Jessie putting on a brave face after having to remove a tick from her own body right now. Jessie, on a scale of 1 to 10, just how much fear is currently coursing through your veins?
Probably like an 11 out of 10. I'm an anxious person to begin with, so this is peaking. I am peaking right now. And during this show, if you guys catch me and I'm just disassociating, just don't mind me. Because that's what I've been doing all morning. I texted my doctor and he asked me to call him. So that means it's bad, okay?
Is there anything worse than when someone just tells you, doesn't give you the answer? Because in 2024, God forbid, someone you text message just text you a response to the question. When a doctor or a parent says, hey, can you call me? Everyone's instinct, and Dad, this is something that because of time and the nature of your relationship with your parents, then you can never fully appreciate the text message that says, hey, can you call me? And the fear that strikes in our hearts. So, Jesse, I do feel for you truly there as you battle one of the Northeast's greatest foes, the tick that most of us that have ever wandered around the woods have to try and think about. So
literally,
F them
ticks. F them ticks. All right, F them ticks. That's just all I gotta say.
F them ticks. Indeed. If we can keep this show on the rails today, it'll be a minor miracle. But we will press on because, Dad, last night we got at least an answer to one question from the NFL weekend that we had been wondering about here. We mentioned there's plenty to get to on the top end of the league, but Sunday Night Football had a lot of juice on both sides. On one side for the New York Jets, they have the new arrival of wide receiver Devontae Adams. Aaron Rodgers brings over yet another one of his former teammates in an effort to try and soup up this Jets offense that had been struggling so far this season. And on the other side, Mike Tomlin, after a 4-2 start, decides to go and change his quarterback out, taking Justin Fields off the field, who had led them to that 4-2 start, and inserting Russell Wilson, who had been the starter this offseason before the injury in training camp upended that. And we're all wondering how this is going to go. And 37-15 later in favor of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Russell Wilson coming off a night where he sets a Steelers record, a franchise record for passing yards in a Steelers debut by a quarterback. Dad, it wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Low completion percentage, a bunch of issues early on especially. But I think the thing that most Steelers fans and certainly Mike Tomlin were probably hoping to see showed up, and that was some of the downfield passing attack, getting George Pickens more involved in this offense more consistently, and by the end of this thing, the rushing attack still showing up in a lot of the same ways that it had with Justin Fields at the helm. So ultimately, Dad, is this a pass-fail? I think we can grade it on here. Is this a pass for Russell Wilson in his first outing?
Well, boy, it sure didn't start out that way, did it? I mean, it started out like, was this the right decision? And even Mike Tomlin, listening to Tirico and Collinsworth said in their production meeting, Tomlin was like, I'm not sure who our starter is. He basically gave the line, we'll know when we know. But he did say if they do go back to Justin, it will be Justin. And that will be it. That they didn't plan on switching off. And it started off rough for Russ. And especially in the red zone, they were even bringing up the fact that maybe they would have that a separate package for Justin Fields in the red zone because Russ had struggled, has struggled in the past in the red zone. And they had struggled early, but then they got their footing. He got his footing. He's known for the deep ball, the balloon ball that gives your receiver a great chance. And George Pickens, is a better than 50-50 ball guy, especially on a deep ball like that. And he had one in the game. Had a couple chances at one, had a nice fade route on the end zone. I know that you don't like. I don't really like it either, but it worked for a touchdown. And I think the key, though, because Russ can't run like Justin, is they did get the running game going. They ran for 149 yards. They averaged over 4 yards a carry. They carried the ball 36 times. So they were living on the running game while Russ found his footing in the passing game. So I think, obviously, it's a thumbs up for this game. It started out a little shaky, but you have to imagine Russ hasn't played a game in a while. He has not played a game in a while, that there would have to be a little bit of rust. So we'll see. We'll see if it continues on. The defense stepped up. They need defense and running game, right? Neither one of these quarterbacks is a passing juggernaut. Russ is a better passer than Justin Fields, but I don't think you can live on the pass for this team. They need the strong running game, and they need the strong defense.
And I think that's the most reassuring thing, though, Dad, is both of those things.
Yeah.
I mean, the defense is going to be unaffected by this change. And clearly last night, they showed up big. You had an undrafted rookie get his hands on the football. You had the Steelers team block 2 field goals, which this was overall the most Steelers win humanly possible, right, Dad? You heard Najee Harris coming into this game talking about the entirety of the team and not just focusing on the quarterback and it being 1 of 22 and all those things that sound like cliches to the outside world that Mike Tomlin actually gets this team to believe. And that sort of everyone's hand in the pile win last night in a situation where the focus for the outside was all going to be on the quarterback, the most Steelers outcome humanly possible. But to your point about the run game, the fact that still showed up. Now, that could be partially the Jets, who also got run on big time by Buffalo last week, and have shown that that's an area where you can get over on them, even if they are really adept at rushing the passer and getting pressure on the quarterback. I thought that had to be encouraging for Pittsburgh overall. Hey, your rushing attack under Arthur Smith that uses a lot of quarterback run, and that no doubt Justin Fields helped out with his legs, both as a designed rusher and as a scrambler.
Right.
If that still looked the way that it did in the game last night, and you would the added element of the passing attack, again, neither quarterback has gone in and, in my mind, slammed the door shut on the other by their otherworldly level of play. But I do think in the Steelers kind of mixing up the bag, this is what they wanted to see, which is a little bit more consistency out of the passing game. And so, Dad, I'd imagine Russell Wilson probably going to get the start in the next game, again, barring something unforeseen injury-wise, right?
I would believe so. And let's remember, Justin Fields went 4-2 in his 6 starts. It's not like, they had a bad record. So he went 4-2. So, they're saying if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. As we know, Mike Tomlin doesn't owe either one of these quarterbacks anything. Neither one is costing them a big amount. So he can kind of tinker with it. And we kind of knew when they called it a quarterback competition in camp and stuff, it really wasn't. It was really Russ was going to be number 1. And then he had the calf show up, and it lingered. So that gave Justin Fields the chance. And quite honestly, in the long run, especially if Russ keeps starting, I think it helped Justin to get 6 starts under his belt and kind of get accustomed to the offense a little bit in case they do have to go back to him, because it's still a long season. Russ is still an older player, and he's still dealing with a soft tissue injury that you hope doesn't reoccur, or he could struggle in a game or two, and that could bring Justin back. So I listen, they're 5-2. So something's working. Obviously the defense is working, which is going to be the main thing for them.
But to your point, in this game on offense, it was working too. The Steelers scored a season high in points in this game. We mentioned already the passing output for Russell Wilson. Dad, if you tinker with your brain a little bit and reframe this where Russell Wilson was the entrenched starter already going into the season, and if you really slot Justin Fields in as a backup and say, oh, your backup quarterback just went 4-2, that's the thing we talk about all the time. It's what we had with Cooper Rush in Dallas a couple of years ago during a season where they won 12 games. That's all you can possibly look for. We understand the Steelers quarterback situation always to us felt more complicated to that, but maybe inside that locker room, it's really been that simple where Mike Tomlin and this team view Russell Wilson as their starter, and Justin Fields is a guy and Justin Fields, give him credit, handled this the exact right way on his end.
Yes,
saw
he
the
did.
sound of him going into the weekend where he said, it was my job to go out there and definitively prove this, and I didn't do it. And really embrace the competitive mindset that's what drives that Steelers building to a record like 5-2. So, again, we can all question it and all think, hey, maybe this is probably a bad idea to tinker with considering. But I said going into last week, true leadership is Mike Tomlin understanding and believing in his methods and resolve while the outside world questions all of that. So they find a way to get it done. Dad, for the Jets on the other side, kind of what we've been used to for them and sort of underscores exactly what we thought going into this. Now, the Davante Adams effect probably will take a little bit longer to be felt considering he just got there last week. And while he's got all the chemistry in the world with Aaron Rodgers, it's still an offense that he hasn't lived in with this current team yet. But we saw some of the same issues along the offensive line pop up. Aaron Rodgers still having a lot of the same stuff there. Davante Adams has 3 catches on 9 targets for only 30 yards in this one, Dad. So for this one, if we're grading pass fail on the other side, is this more incomplete or is this the same old Jets?
I would say as far as Rodgers and Davante, it's incomplete, but you kind of saw the same old Jets. The defense giving up 37 was a little surprising to me. Of the 39 passes that Aaron Rodgers threw, 27 of the targets went to Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and Davante Adams. They all had 9 targets each, and Davante just had the 3 receptions. So certainly Aaron was trying to get him in to play. Alan Lazard only had 4 targets, had 4 receptions out of those. He kind of was kind of the odd man out as far as more targets in the game with Davante Adams coming in.
Speaking of odd man out, if you had given me a prop bet for would Mike Williams not only have a catch in this game, but have a critical fourth down catch late in this one, would have never in the world thought about taking that after the roller coaster that guy's been on for the last week or so, where you go from being the guy with the miscommunication at the end of a game with Aaron Rodgers, a guy that he's not at practice for a couple of days after the Davante Adams trade when everyone's talking about Mike Williams as someone that could potentially be on the outs, to ending up making that play to the point where Aaron Rodgers has to shout him out a little bit in the post-game presser. That dude, you want to talk about being a pro and weathering the storm. Yeah. He deserves that. But, Dad, overall for this Jets team, it's kind of the same problem where, especially against the Steelers group that got a little bit healthier along the edges at pass rusher, you saw for Moses and Tyron Smith, it's still older pass rushers who are having trouble at times sticking athletically with guys that are much younger and at this point more talented than them, and that's not going to get fixed with Davante Adams.
No, it's not. There's nobody else coming in the door that's going to help. And Aaron Rodgers isn't as mobile as he once was. We've seen him be mobile, escape, and make great plays down the field. He just can't do that as well. That's through injury and age. It happens. Father Time always is going to win. He threw 2 more interceptions. He's got 10 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. He's on his way to just his 4th double-digit interception season. Now, his 3rd was his last year in Green Bay. Before he had the 4 plays for the Jets and was done in Green Bay, he had 12 interceptions. And then you go back to the first 4 years of his career, 4 or 5 years, he had a couple of years where he had double-digit interception. He is a single-digit interception guy who is 3 away from being a double-digit, and we have more than half the season to go. So he's en route to have double-digit interceptions again, and it's a combination of things. Again, his lack of mobility, the pass rush. He does have receivers. I mean, you can't say he doesn't have weapons with Lazard and Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall coming out of the backfield. I mean, he's got weapons. It's just getting the ball to those weapons.
Well, and sometimes they have to catch him, too. Like one of those interceptions was Garrett Wilson just ejecting the ball off his own chest when it was thrown perfectly to him in a way that I thought after that, Aaron Rodgers was going to have him in the doghouse the rest of the night. Now, he might just be important enough to where even Aaron Rodgers, especially at this point in the game, can't ice him out the way he probably would have in the past for a young receiver making those kind of mistakes. See those couple of years ago with the Green Bay Packers and a lot of those first-year guys. But that was another example of it's not all his fault, Dad, but certainly Aaron Rodgers, the part of the equation and the value prop for the Jets was they thought they were getting the MVP guy or something closer to that, and he just might not live here anymore. Between the offensive line and the lack of protection, his own age, lack of mobility, coming off injury, it's all caught up enough, Dad, to where Aaron Rodgers does not any longer look special. We see fleeting instances where special shows up from Aaron Rodgers, but right now he might just be a very good older quarterback who's got limitations that this offense specifically does not cater to. And this offense, by the way, that does not do a ton to threaten anybody else on opposing defense, you just don't see teeth with this Jets offense. And I think that's going to continue to be a problem even with Davante Adams.
And as you mentioned, the defense struggling a bit against the run. And they did something I didn't expect. They ended up signing an adjusted contract for Hassan Reddick. I thought Hassan Reddick would get traded away. I thought that was a done deal. It would look like maybe Detroit, who obviously needs a pass rusher, but they did an adjusted contract for him. So talk about all in. They are all in, and they're 2-5 in their all-in year, which does not bode well.
No, they waived the $12 million in fines that he had racked up too. So while it was still probably an ill-advised holdout, and they said they'll work towards a long-term deal, at the end of the day, one of the stranger, more bizarre turns for a pass rusher and an acquisition for a team that, like you said, Dad, ultimately may prove to be kind of futile at this point, because again, if Aaron Rodgers at the helm of this is not truly special, then I don't know much of what the Jets have to hang their hat on. So they can try and keep figuring that out in New York. Coming up next, though, we'll try and figure out more of what's going on with the top teams in the NFL. Are the Kansas City Chiefs actually the best team in pro football? And what should we feel about Browns fans booing Deshaun Watson? Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. Now, stop me if you've heard this one before, fellas. The Chiefs beat the 49ers. Super Bowl rematch that was billed as having lots of fireworks turned out to be a mid-off between two quarterbacks who were competing with who could throw the most interceptions. So that was fun to watch, more like exhausting. But I want to know this. Okay, so the Chiefs do their thing. They manage to get it done. When they can't get it done in the air, they get it done on the ground. Patrick Mahomes doing his thing. Brock Purdy struggles. But the 49ers continue to rack up injuries, okay? Brandon Ayuk ends up going off with an injury. They fear it might be an ACL. Is it time to press the panic button for the 49ers? And it was messy, but the Chiefs are the only undefeated team in the NFL right now. So are they the best team in the NFL? What do we think?
Yeah,
so
Dan, let's
questions.
start there with. Yeah, I was gonna say that's the double question there. I'm gonna take the one that I want to talk about the most, which is: are the Chiefs the best team in the NFL, Dad? Because in a day and an afternoon where we watched what the Lions did on offense, where we've seen what Baltimore's done since that 0-2 start, and what we thought the Chiefs were going to be at the beginning of this season, it certainly doesn't feel like the best team in football, but they are still the one I would bet on the most in key situations, if that makes sense, right? Like, when it comes down to the end of the year in the postseason, when you start asking me to pick, if it were to end today, it would still be hard for me to look away from this Chiefs team that finds a way, is reached that late stage Patriot mode where they're the most resourceful team in the NFL and able to shapeshift through whatever changes the roster throws at them. But high-end production-wise, they cannot match offensively what teams like the Lions, what teams like the Baltimore Ravens can do. And so that becomes a bit of an issue for me. But right now, they are the lone remaining undefeated, even if I can't definitively say, hey, yeah, that looks like the best team in the NFL.
And it's Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, but who saw in this game? Who saw in this game one quarterback completing 59% of his passes, Mahomes, the other 54% of his passes, Brock Purdy, no touchdowns and 5 interceptions between the two of them? I mean, who saw that coming? I mean, I listen, at the end of the day, I would have to agree with you. And a lot of it's because of Patrick Mahomes. His name still carries that weight, even though his play isn't necessarily doing it. And he came in this year really kind of mad off of last year, even winning the Super Bowl, that their offense wasn't in that rhythm. But quite honestly, the rushing attack has gone well. Kareem Hunt, has been a nice pickup for them, obviously with Pacheco being out. They're getting it done. I mean, defensively, this was a 14-12 game going into the fourth quarter. So you got to give that Chief defense, actually both defenses, some credit for this.
Well, I mean, Dad, that's what I say. You say it's Patrick Mahomes, but I say it's the foundation is the defense and the running game right now. Mahomes, both these quarterbacks were dealt an interesting hand going into this game and this season so far because they've lost a lot of the weapons that they came in believing they were going to have. And at the start of this game, you had Juju Smith-Schuster, who, say what you want about him for everybody else, for this Chiefs team, he works and has actually become a weapon that Patrick Mahomes can rely on now through his second stint. He's lost to a hamstring injury early on in this game. And on the other side, you had Deebo Samuel, who was supposed to play in this game, but came in with an illness injury designation, had trouble catching his breath on the sideline, and went briefly before being shut down for the rest of the game in a game where you were already, if you're Brock Purdy, without Jawan Jennings, who's been great for them in the absence of a lot of their primary weapons this season. And then now on the other side of this, you might have lost your last star wide receiver to an ACL injury potentially for the rest of the season. And so, Dad, as they wait to find out the future for Brandon Ayuk, it was one where, hey, with Brock Purdy, we know there's not going to be a lot of people necessarily coming to his aid because this offense has been so chock full of weapons. But, man, even for him, he's looking around now going, who the hell are most of these guys I'm throwing the ball to?
Because the NFC, it was basically, we thought, top-heavy. And that we gave San Francisco the benefit of the doubt, saying they'll work through the injuries, but they may just have to work through too many, right? Now, the division, they're only a game back of Seattle. They are 1-2 in the division. Seattle's 0-1 in the division. Seattle put it on Atlanta yesterday. So, you know, you have the Cardinals at 2-4 and the Rams at 2-4, San Francisco at 3-4. So that's kind of a mosh pit altogether. I would still probably trust San Francisco, though at some point the injuries just become too great to overcome. And I think we're getting there with San Francisco. So much talent, but so much talent, unfortunately, is sitting on the sideline. I lean toward the Detroit Lions. They just seem to be the most complete, passing, running, defense. They knocked off the other undefeated team in Minnesota in a battle of heavyweights for that division. Still a division that has all teams at least 2 games above 500. But the thing about it is, Mike, who else is there in the NFC, right? So, I mean, there's the Commanders. Are we buying into them for the whole year? Now, Jaden Daniels gets hurt. We'll talk about that. He has one long run, and he's done for the game. Detroit, Minnesota. Do we buy into the South? We think Atlanta, maybe Paper Lions, or Paper Tigers, I should say. Tampa Bay, are we buying into them? So I do not think the NFC is very deep.
It's not, but the 49ers, if they can't get healthy at the right time, have showed you, hey, they're a team that's capable of getting beat. And I think it's kind of like the thing we've seen in college football where things have leveled out so much this season and even the top teams don't look as infallible as they used to in the past. In the NFL, it's largely been the same. And while the Chiefs don't have a blemish on their record, they look more human than they ever have. Again, if you put me in a high leverage game, I'm still betting the Chiefs. Like at this point, they've shown they can work their way out of a lot of problems. They're the best problem solving team in the NFL. I'll say that about Kansas City and what Patrick Mahomes has done. Hasn't looked quite himself, certainly hasn't looked like what they thought they were going to look like this weekend or this season, but he's found a way while the circumstances work themselves out with the skill weapons there, and even in a running back room that doesn't have their main guy and has found a way to do it with backups in there. But Dad, to your point, I do think the Detroit Lions right now, after going out this weekend, their first weekend without Aiden Hutchinson as their pass rusher against the other undefeated team in the NFL and the Minnesota Vikings, who had the best defense in the NFL so far this season, and put on that performance, this Lions team right now, I think, gets the title of best team in the NFL, and I think earned it pretty resoundingly so this weekend. And Dad, I know a bunch of people are saying it at this point, so we're not certainly starting a process that hasn't already been going. Jared Goff's playing MVP football right now, and I think that we can say that out loud at this point and not feel bad about it.
Yeah, no, I agree that he is. Now, you'd like them to bring in somebody for Hutchinson being out. They may just live within, but you'd like him to try and get. And again, I thought it was going to be Hassan Reddick, who's now staying with the Jets. But they're the most complete team. I mean, looking at it, I would probably in a quick decision, I would probably take Lions and Baltimore over Kansas City at this point. But to your point, and to reiterate what I was saying, because they have Patrick Mahomes, I know they're more evenly distributed with defense and the running game, but Pat's still Pat, you know, and which I guess I would ask this, and they're pretty heavyweight quarterbacks, because you just said Jared Goff is playing at an MVP level. When it comes down to it, who would you trust? And I ask this as a question, rank in order. Trust at the end of a game: Mahomes, Goff, Lamar Jackson.
Oh, yeah, I mean, listen, that's an argument that Jared Goff's going to lose every time, and it's not as far back as it used to be because, again, Jared Goff has shown you over the course of his time in Detroit that this is a guy they trust and can be trusted. He's been rewarded financially for that. But, no, yeah, obviously, Mahomes has way too much capital in important moments banked up with us. Lamar Jackson is far too talented for me to pick Jared Goff. And so, yeah, you're right, but it is still how he works within the context of the rest of this team. And right now, Detroit on offense is an absolute shredder, and he's a big part of that. Jared Goff currently leads all qualified quarterbacks entering the week at 7 slate, and that didn't go away during the course of this game. He led all qualified quarterbacks in yards per attempt, completion percentage, and completion percentage over expectation. And in this game, Dad, was a guy who went out and absolutely shredded. He was under pressure on a career-high 51.7% of his dropbacks against the Vikings, and under pressure finished 10 of 11 for 164 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was money, and it's not just numbers. You saw it in the game, him maneuvering against this Vikings defense that had reduced the likes of C.J. Stroud, the likes of Brock Purdy, the likes of the Green Bay Packers, all to atoms with what they had done defensively, and Jared Goff is somehow the guy that walked out of the fire and still kept moving forward.
Yeah, and he's got definitely has good targets to throw to, good ammunition, a good running game as well. They gained 144 yards, so I think they're the best team in football. I do. Not just because I picked them to win the Super Bowl, but I think they're playing the best right now. And the Chiefs just find a way to keep getting it done. They're not going to go undefeated. They're going to falter at some point. But I look for another battle of Kansas City and Baltimore in the AFC title game again. The Bills, though, are playing a little better. The Bills are.
Yes.
Pittsburgh, I just can't put them. I just can't put Pittsburgh there just yet. There's just not enough passing firepower for that team for me.
Yeah, the Steelers are going to be how much you believe in the overall team part of this football equation, because, again, if the defense continues to look like it did last night and those guys are healthy at the right time, especially with that pass rush up front with Cam Hayward and TJ Watt, that's going to be a dangerous group down the stretch. But I'm with you. They seem more like they are lurking, like maybe by the end of the season they could have that potential for the team that nobody wants to play, but they're not the front runners in the same way that you mentioned the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs are there. I want to stick in the NFC, though, Dad, because we talked about the 49ers a bit. Do you feel any differently about the Vikings coming off this game where, hey, offensively, you are going up against a defense that didn't have their best pass rusher? Now, the Lions did respond when they didn't have Aiden Hutchinson out there. They decided to blitz on 20 of 35 dropbacks, which is their highest rate in the game since Aaron Glenn took over at quarterback. So the message was clear. And on the back end, Dad, they may not have a star pass rusher, but Brian Branch, man, good Lord, since he stepped on the field for the Lions has been special. But this game in particular showed up and was getting his hands all over football. They've used him in a bunch of different roles on that defense, from the star last year as that big nickel player to now more safety this season. He's been sensational for them. So they might not have a star up front anymore, but they've got a guy who's a difference maker in the back that certainly can help those guys at the front probably have a better chance than they would without him.
Yeah, and you talk about pressure. They had 4 sacks, did Detroit. 3 of the sacks came from, I believe, linebackers. 2 or 3 came from linebackers. So, yeah, that may be the way that you have to go about your business now. Aaron Glenn may have to blitz a little more, may have to send a little more pressure, which will put a little more pressure on the secondary. But if you feel you have the personnel to do it, so be it.
But by the way, I took a question about the Vikings, then immediately answered it with more about the Lions. So I'll ask you again, because I don't think much differently about the Vikings after this one. It's a 2-point game that they played in here, and ultimately it was a home game for the Vikings. They had all those things working for them, but this looked like the same Vikings team largely that we had seen. It was just the Lions offense, especially up front after the early going where Kevin Zeitler was out, so they had a backup at right guard who struggled a bit early. But once they got through that initial run, they seemed to be able to absorb all of those pressure looks designed to rattle opposing teams.
I think because of the lack of depth in the NFC, Minnesota has to be there, right? You have to give their even though they gave up 31 to Detroit, their defense with Brian Flores running it is still a really good defense overall. They'll give up some like they did to Detroit. Detroit has a powerful offense. But again, there's just a lack of depth in the NFC. I mean, I just struggle to say, oh, yeah, that's a dominating team outside of Detroit. You know, even though there are other winning records in Washington and Philadelphia and Tampa Bay and Atlanta and Seattle, it's not like I say, oh, yeah, that's a dominant team. It's a team that could make a run, but I definitely think Detroit is the team. But Minnesota's definitely in it just because, again, they're playing well. They're playing above expectations, especially on the offensive side. But there's a lack of true depth, and a lot of that has to do with the injury bug that has hit San Francisco.
The one that ends up coming out this weekend looking the best and looking again like a 3-team playoff division is the NFC North, though. We had this battle of the Titans where both the Vikings and the Lions leave looking pretty good. And then a big matchup of teams in similar stations in the AFC and NFC. The Houston Texans, young team led by an incredibly young, talented quarterback, goes up against a Green Bay team led by Jordan Love in kind of the same situation, and they get a close win. It's like this one where I don't feel too differently about either team leaving because they're both good. They both have these strengths that showed up in the game. But the bottom line, if you're the NFC North, is the three of your teams were probably three of the most impressive teams this weekend, and two of them got massive wins. And the only reason the third didn't is probably because they were playing the other team from the NFC North. So that's still the hottest division in pro football, and one that looks like it's going to be a dogfight until late in the game.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here with you guys. Let's continue working through the NFL slate with the appropriately named Mic'd Up Monday. So, guys, first up, Deshaun Watson went down with an Achilles injury. Fans booed him during the intros and then cheered when he went down with his injury. Here's Jameis Winston on how the fans reacted.
The way I was raised, I was taught to love no matter the circumstances, especially for people who do right by you. I'm grateful that I had a chance to serve Deshaun, but I am very upset with the reaction to a man that has had the world against him for the past 4 years, and he put his body and life on the line for this city every single day, regardless of your perception, regardless of what you thought should happen with him. He committed every single day that I've been here to be the best that he can be for this team.
I feel like hearing a lot of the reaction, not everybody, but there have been some players that have come out and been very outraged about how Deshaun's been treated, and I just want to know where that outrage was when he was accused of sexual assault.
Yeah, this is, Dan, a situation where no one is going to come out of this looking good. Myles Garrett was another player that came up and publicly had things to say. I even saw LeBron James talking about booing their own players and booing guys when they're injured. And this is one of those things where I think it's complicated for a lot of these players, because when they see that, I'm sure part of it is they see themselves in addition to the guy that they go to work with every day who's down there on the field. And when you're in the middle of a lost season and it feels like it can be players versus fans at time, you get some of that bunker mentality where you're trying to push back on this group on the outside that might not feel like they have your back right now while you're inside that locker room. At the same time, though, that I'm not going to spend too much time chastising the crowd on this one, who, by the way, I'm sure some of those fans at some points cheered for Deshaun Watson when things went well, albeit that's a limited sample size with his time in Cleveland. They're booing because he's a bad football player now who also has these things attached to him that Jesse just mentioned. And so it's just a difficult situation to wrap your arms around, because, again, there's no winners here. And now Deshaun Watson, his career, I know the money makes it complicated, but, man, it's hard to look at this any other way, Dad, than Deshaun Watson's career is likely over, because if the Browns are done with him, there's not going to be another team at this point that takes a chance on him. And that's driven by football, which at the core of all of this, we've had the moral conversations about Deshaun Watson and his place in the game. Everything that happened yesterday is about Deshaun Watson, the football player, and that includes the response from his teammates. When they're talking there, unfortunately, I think Jameis Winston and Myles Garrett sound a bit tone deaf when they say things like he's done that. When Myles Garrett says he's been a model citizen in college and mostly in the NFL, those are things that ignore the outside perspective in favor of the one that they see every day on the inside. And those two pictures are drastically different for all of us and for those players on the Browns as well.
Yeah, to your point, it is a bunker mentality. And Jesse, to your point of how you defend it, it is a bunker mentality, and he had his troubles before he came to the Browns, so they see how he acted as a Cleveland Brown. Jameis Winston saying he's had the world against him, that falls tone deaf to me, because he's the one who may put the world against him. His actions put the world against him, so I don't feel for him there. I'm never a fan of fans booing a player getting hurt. Michael Irvin at the Vet, when he was with the Cowboys, banged his head off the turf and had to be taken off the field, and the fans cheered. Never really a fan of cheering when somebody's hurt. But, boy, they were chanting, "You deserve this." I mean, they were, and you're right. These are the same fans that were cheering him for the sporadic times that he played well. The fan is stuck in a hard spot, right? They have the moral thought of, I don't want this guy on my team, and then the jersey-wearing thought of, well, this guy's on my team, and I want my team to do well, so I want this guy to do well. But basically, it is going to come down to a football decision. He has not played anywhere near how he played in Houston. His contract is just an absolute anvil around a team's neck. So I do think he is going to be done, and I don't know how you can restructure the fully guaranteed deal. Maybe there's ways around it. People a lot smarter than me to deal with that. But the players backing him doesn't surprise me at all, because you are with those players more than you're with your family. And again, it was after he had the issues that he had in Houston. But the fans booed him at the end, like you said, at the introduction as well. He's just not a very well-liked player. And to boot, he's not playing well. It's one thing to not be liked, but you play well. A fan will kind of hold their nose and cheer for somebody who's not liked well, as long as they're helping their team. At the end of the day, the jersey they wear is what the team is going to root for. So you have to, in essence, cheer for the player wearing it, even if you don't like him.
And that's the thing. This is not like a complete indictment of everyone involved, right? Not every fan cheered for Deshaun Watson, reveled in him coming over to the Browns, but some did. There were some that were out here defending Deshaun Watson's actions off the field that are indefensible. There were also, I'm sure, probably players in that locker room that were a bit conflicted with it. Jameis Winston and Myles Garrett don't speak for everybody in that locker room, but like in most situations, you're going to have a couple of important voices end up drowning out the rest or polluting a sample size here. But what you heard from Jameis Winston, like, that's sports watching, quite honestly, is this idea that, since he's come over here and done the things that we've asked him to as a football player inside this locker room, should you not forgive a little bit of what's gone on, or maybe just at least soften your stance on that? And for the people on the outside, the answer is no, Dad. I'm sure inside that locker room, I mean, hell, This was a guy back in the day that his head coach in college, Dabo Swinney, called Michael Jordan, that seemed to, by and large, endear himself to the people in his locker room. So I have no doubt that coming over here in Cleveland, for some of these guys, he's probably been a decent coworker, enough to where they see that work, and that's their sample size for him and the guy that they see every single day. That's not who we've gotten on the outside. We've gotten a Deshaun Watson who has been accused into the 20s of times for sexual assault and other sexual impropriety, and a guy who's been defiant at the microphone every chance he's gotten on that. He's not shown contrition. He's not done anything publicly that would make us change any of what we thought about this situation. And so everyone involved is going off what they've seen, and it results in two very different conversations being had where no one can look good or feel good on the other side. But I think especially not these players coming out now in defense of a guy who's been largely indefensible.
Yeah. The players defending him are players who have just worn the same color jersey as he has and have put the past away and say we're only going to base our thought about him being a teammate to us and wearing our colors. And he has been fine when he's worn our colors. The play may not be great, but the person has been fine in their mind. But for fans and for others, it certainly lingers. A player's past stays with them. And it's so weird to say, but a lot of it is on how well you play. It seems so ridiculous to say, right? To do something.
A lot of the reception from fans at times will be because that's conditional, that whole relationship. Again, the reason they were booing yesterday, even though it had that tinge of judgment for Deshaun Watson from a moral high ground, was only because he has played bad enough to now have that team want to move on. And that's ultimately why, Dad, I do think they've got it. There's no way if you're the Haslams, I get you owe him, $45 million a year for the next 2 years. There's no way they can put that guy back out on the field, considering what they've gotten as a product on the field and considering now the toxic environment that exists with and around that fan base. And again, it points back to the Haslams created all of this. Lest we not forget, as we talk about fans and players and everybody else, this team decided to look at scandal as an opportunity to go out there and sign a quarterback to the richest, most guaranteed money-laden contract in the history of the NFL up until that point. So once again, like most things in sports, when you're looking to lay blame at the feet of somebody, it's the Haslams for looking at all of this information and deciding this was not only a guy they wanted to sneak onto the back end of the roster for a spot, they wanted to make him the face of their franchise and pay him more money than anyone ever had at that position.
Yeah. Listen, that's the truth. It's decisions teams make. Look at Kareem Hunt caught on video kicking his girlfriend, right? I mean, he was signed by the Browns and re-signed by the Chiefs. You get another chance if you're deemed to be a good enough player. I mean, it's unfortunately the way it works, not just in football, it's in other aspects of life as well. And the fan, they can either, they have their judgment about that person. But as I said, all things lead to he's wearing our jersey, so we're going to cheer for him. But you're right. The Haslams brought this on. They brought this on. They thought they were everything else be damned. We're getting a top 5 quarterback in the league. We're going to pay him as such, and that's what we're going to get. And so when you don't get that, and you have the recent past that Deshaun Watson has had, this is what you get. You get outraged by fans. And again, you're right. It's because the football didn't live up to expectations. If he had been playing good football, fans would be cheering him. Some, like I said, some may be holding their nose cheering for him, but they'd have been cheering for him because he was helping their team win. The team is greater than the individual as far as these fans. Players come and go. Fans are for decades. Fans hand down season tickets to their kids and their kids' kids. They are there for the long haul.
Yeah, it's a complicated math problem to do because, not everyone who cheers for the Browns is cheering for Deshaun Watson. I don't want to remove personal agency from this, too, because Myles Garrett and Jameis Winston had a choice to come out as strong as they did for Deshaun Watson, knowing full well what he has been accused of and what followed him here to Cleveland. At just the same way, the fans who have shown up, some of them in very overt support for Deshaun Watson, they all had a choice to make. The Haslams are at the root of the cause here, but there is still personal personal agency involved for the people who had a decision of how hard they wanted to back it. And that's why in this situation, Dad, I find myself sort of falling back, because there's going to be people on both sides today that take these fans to task and say that this is classless and you don't boo players that get hurt. And there's going to be people on the other side that want to rehash this with the players that came out in his defense. And I just sort of back away at a situation that all looks ugly for the reasons that we already know, where no outcome was going to look good or make me feel good in all of this. In general, am I a fan of people booing an injured player? No, absolutely not. But am I going to rush to the defense of Deshaun Watson in this situation, given everything I know about him? No, this is not a person I'm inclined to stick my neck out for when it comes to a situation like this. But some of his teammates felt differently based on their personal experience in this situation. And all of this is a mess that gets created when you as an organization decide to take on a player who has double-digit accusations of sexual assault that he, as recently as this season. Like, remember, we had another accusation pop up earlier this season in 2024. So this is not a problem that's off in the distant past or something that he's completely left behind. And so now, because of the turf at this field, quite honestly, a lot of people are going to be bailed out of the rest of this conversation based off an injury that, again, should probably be the thing that will end Deshaun Watson's career. And I think you saw that realization from him on that cart leaving the field.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely think it's over. And again, from the players, what happens when you go to a new team, if you have baggage that follows you, your new teammates give you a clean slate. Right or wrong, again, because fans can think differently.
I don't know if everyone does.
Well, no. Well, to the point of not speaking out about it. You didn't see players who were against him lining up, grabbing a microphone, saying, I'm against this person. They'll stay quiet.
He was also the quarterback of their team. I don't know how realistic that scenario would have been for a lot of guys.
Well, no, if you feel strongly enough about it, I mean, of what he was accused about, you could speak up. But for the most part, players aren't going to. They're going to see how you act as a teammate to you, not where you were in Houston or not what went on. I'm not saying all the players gave him a clean slate, but there are definitely some that gave him a clean slate, say he did his time, he paid his dues, the situation is over. I'm just going to judge him how he is as a Cleveland Brown. That's how some players will deal with it.
I think for most players on a roster, they're worried about themselves. Like Myles Garrett and Jameis Winston have the time to think at a high level on this because Myles Garrett's the best player in that franchise, because Jameis Winston's a veteran who's been around a bunch of places. For most guys, their thought is, all right, he's the quarterback of my team. He either is going to help me keep my job or not, or I have to focus on the things that are going to keep me employed by this team. Most guys in an NFL locker room do not have the ability to think about a lot of this high-level stuff the way all of us do, and the way that a couple of his teammates that decided to speak about this at a prominent level. We can ask Marshall Newhouse about this when he joins us in the second hour of the show. But coming up next, Monday night doubleheader. Let's lock in here on GoJo and Golic.
It's time for DraftKings crowning moments. Check out this bet. So one customer has a lot riding on the World Series. They've already hit on a 4-leg parlay that included the Panthers winning the Cup, Scottie Scheffler winning the Masters, Alcaraz winning Wimbledon, and now the Yankees need to beat the Dodgers to turn $600 into $742K. Cash out? Let us know at GoJo and Golic on Twitter. Crowning Moments is presented by DraftKings. Submit your winning bets for a chance to be featured. DraftKings, the crown is yours. We'll be back to break down the 2 Monday Night Football games with Marshall Newhouse coming up next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. Pumped to welcome in on Monday, as we always do, our friend, former NFL veteran offensive lineman and Super Bowl champion, Marshall Newhouse, getting ready to preview the Monday night doubleheader. We got the Ravens and Buccaneers. We got the Chargers at Cardinals. Marshall will be on the pregame power-up with Trey Wingo, Claudia Bellafato, and the rest of the crew there, 6 p.m. Eastern tonight on the DraftKings Network. But, Marshall, before you got on here, my dad was quietly seething because earlier when we talked about the Chiefs getting the dub, remaining the only undefeated team, we didn't get to Patrick Mahomes pump faking dudes on the sideline and getting that extracurricular run, because in Dad's mind now, you just can't do anything with these quarterbacks along the sideline anymore, Dad. You're pissed.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, if he got hit there, you get the penalty because it's so close. You figure he's going out of bounds. I'm not going to hit him. He does the little fake step to the sideline, and a guy eases up and he runs down the sideline. That's why quarterbacks should be blasted. If they have a toe inbounds, it should be illegal blasting for a play like that where he runs for 33 yards, Marshall. I know you guys are offensive guys, but man, that aggravated me as a former defensive player.
No, I agree. It's not as if Patrick Mahomes already doesn't have all of the stones in his Thanos gauntlet. He's going to go tiptoeing on the sideline and make everybody slow down. And then, ironically, either later that drive or later in the game, he scrambles up the middle for a touchdown and trucks one of the biggest linebackers in the league. So yeah, he knows that people slow down on the sideline. He knows that guys don't want to get fined or get a penalty because all he has to do is embellish just a little bit. I won't call it flopping, but he's got to just put a little flair, a little pizzazz on the way he falls out of bounds. And that's a free 15. And so guys are easing up, and it just doesn't feel like an equal opportunity thing right there.
Marshall, are you sold on this Chiefs team? They're undefeated still. They seem like a mid-tier Chiefs team by their own standards, and yet they went out and undressed a 49ers team that was pretty banged up with injury by the end yesterday. Is this the best team in the NFL?
It is, and it's what's happening is they're doing this in ways that I think, don't like to watch necessarily. The Chiefs that we got accustomed to seeing were, they're still creative offensively, but they had a deep shot or two or three a game, and they had Travis Kelce running his just make-a-wish routes with Patrick Mahomes, and everyone's taking that away. That's what the NFL does, but all they're doing is playing even better defense, the Chiefs are, and just figuring out ways to win. And then the thing that's kind of unspoken is that they're kind of dragging teams into the muck. Like Patrick Mahomes has 8 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and he's not playing particularly well, but he's playing good enough. And every team that they play looks worse than that team had looked before. And so that, to me, that's a sign of an organization that just knows what they're doing and doesn't care how they get the dub. They're just getting the dub.
Where do you rank going to the NFC? We were talking about Detroit and Minnesota, who had just played. Detroit got the win. San Francisco being banged up. How deep is the NFC, and who is at the top?
Yeah, I think it's Detroit, Minnesota, Tampa kind of jumbled up there. Detroit's just so impressive. It's hard to watch them and not just put a smile on your face. The things that they do, the way they run the ball, and just the way that Coach Dan Campbell coaches them. A fake punt doesn't work. He's like, all right, whatever. We're going to keep doing what we do. Jared Goff's playing really, really good football. And Dave Montgomery, he fumbles the ball. They come right back to him. They got Jahmyr Gibbs, and they're playing opportunistic defense. There's nothing you can't say about the Detroit Lions that you don't love. I think Minnesota's still a contender. They weren't 5-0 for no reason, but I think they ran into a team that is hotter than they are right now. But Minnesota is still to be reckoned with. And then what we're going to see tonight with Tampa Bay, Baker is playing the most free and confident ball of his career. And they're a really fun team to watch. And they've got a defensive head coach who really knows how to scheme things up on the other end. And so I think those are my top 3 in the NFC if I'm missing anybody.
Well, where do you put the Philadelphia Eagles in that? They get a resounding win yesterday in Saquon Barkley's return to face his former team in the New York Giants, where he went off 17 carries for 176 yards and a touchdown. Jalen Hurts, though, it seems like a real interesting season for the quarterback that took them to the Super Bowl just 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, and the reason I don't put Philly up there quite as high as those other teams is their offense feels a little bit limited. You can say that with Saquon running for 170 or whatever, 180, whatever he ran for. I think that was a little bit of the revenge juice, even if you won't mention it. But a guy AJ Brown, I really like him as a weapon. But the offense feels like it has a ceiling, and I don't think coming off that Super Bowl, I didn't suspect that coming from Jalen Hurts and the way that he maneuvers as a quarterback. And so until they show me something else as far as the execution, the offensive line that has been so lauded has played okay, has played good enough. And then there's the questions at the head coaching position, because we know as soon as you get in the playoffs, everything becomes more magnified, and a head coach who has questionable game management and strategy in real time, I think the team has a very, very tough ceiling to break through. And so that's what I see with the Eagles.
So as far as San Francisco, the rep from the NFC in the Super Bowl last year, how, if at all, can they overcome the injuries they've had?
Listen, I don't know, because it just seems like there are too many important roles that Coach Kyle Shanahan has defined that are missing. Everyone wants to do the cliche next man up, but it's hard to have a next man up when the guy that you're replacing is CMC and Debo and Ayuk And, these are prime time players that they have designed this offense around specifically. And so you want Kyle Shanahan to show us more. I mean, I think he's one of the best coaches in the league, but we've got to see that they can contend, and not even contend, but play well enough to win, because we know sometimes it's ugly. Senior, this. Junior, this. Like, winning by 1 point, to me, there's no shame in that. It's such a hard thing to do to win in this league, but they're having trouble cobbling together wins. I mean, that's not something that I thought I'd see them say. And Brock Purdy, in what is the most important year of his career, is playing okay. I mean, again, before this, he's had some pretty good games, but against the best team in the league, they looked kind of dismantled. And so I don't know how they figure this out. You want to say lean on the run game. Outside of Trent Williams, the offensive line is fine. There's just nothing that they're doing exceptionally well right now, and that's troubling.
Troubling for the 49ers. I want to hit on one more NFC team before we head to the Monday night doubleheader. The Washington Commanders had the thing that most people feared with that team happen this weekend. Jaden Daniels breaks off on a run, gets folded up a bit at the end, and leaves with what people believe is a rib injury. Now, I think his mom tweeted out that he's doing okay. He was on the sideline after smiling, and they get a culture win with Marcus Mariota, the backup, going out there and dismantling what's a Panthers franchise in disarray right now. But Marshall, how far did this go in sort of tapping into a lot of the fears that we had about Jaden and his slight frame being able to hold up against the pounding of a season?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a mixtape of Jaden Daniels taking some heinous hits in college, and that's a legitimate concern, because he is slimly built relative to other quarterbacks. But I like Washington a lot. I think they've done a good job of using his strengths, and he is slowly figuring out how to protect himself. That was an unfortunate play. You hope that the rib injury doesn't last too long. But yeah, it feels good to have Marcus Mariota, who fits also what Jaden Daniels is doing really well, to be able to come in and kind of pick up where he leaves off right there. But, I've had questions about their defense for a while. They're okay. They're winning games now, but their back end, to me, is very vulnerable. And that's why I don't have as much confidence in them as I do the other teams in the top of the NFC. But Jaden Daniels is playing really, really well. It's been an incredible story his rookie year, but he's got to protect himself. And they have to really cross their fingers that his frame can take the full extent of the NFL season. Listen, 17 games now. We were excited about him, but we're now, only 7 weeks in. There's a whole nother time to go. And if they want to be a team in the next playoff run, there's even more games after that.
So let's look at one of the games tonight. Tampa Bay playing Baltimore. It's the first round 2018 quarterback pick. Baker Mayfield, the first pick of 2018, and Lamar, the 32nd pick, the last pick in the first round. And I guess the question would be, can Tampa Bay, who was about mid-ranking in stopping the run, can they stop the rushing attack of Baltimore? Can anybody? And as an old lineman, I'm sure you love the fact that they're leading in rushing, and old linemen are just moving forward.
Absolutely. I got a chance to play with Derrick Henry. He's just one of those guys that he makes your jobs that much easier. And then you couple that with the ways that they can use Lamar Jackson's leg as well. They've got a really formidable attack. And I don't think anyone can really stop them other than themselves. It's truly at this point. And they've done such a good job of being patient. We were all kind of up in arms. Derrick Henry had a really great week one, and then it kind of tailed off for a second. And people were like, is it catching up to him? Is this, father time? Is this not a scheme fit? And all Baltimore does with Coach Harbaugh is just kind of wait, do their thing, be consistent, be physical. And here we are with Derrick Henry looking like the free agency steal of the offseason. And so, and their offensive line, I think, had legitimate concerns with just a lack of experience this year. They've got the mountain of a man and Faalele at right guard, but they're breaking in a right tackle. They're breaking in, an inexperienced center. And so things are coming together for them. And this is something that I think can last them through the rest of the season and into the playoffs. And what it does is it gives better looks for Lamar with his arm and with the rest of the offense. They get to take shots now. They get to set up play action. They get to set up their screen game, because Derrick Henry can catch the ball too. So this is a really fun offense to watch. Very much a throwback offense, but tough to deal with for sure. And I think Tampa's defense has played pretty well. Todd Bowles calls them really well, but this is something that in the fourth quarter, makes you very, very honest about what you can do on defense because they kind of know what's happening. Derrick Henry's coming downhill. Do you want to stop it in the A gap?
Yeah, and that's a business decision that very few people are inclined to make. We've seen this Tampa Bay defense usually goes as Vita Vea and Antoine Winfield's junior health availability allows them to go. On the other side, it'll be interesting, that deep passing attack for Baker Mayfield against the secondary that's been the one spot for Baltimore defensively. People seem to be able to go and find a win. Marshall, in the second game, the Chargers at the Arizona Cardinals, all we talked about coming into the season, year one for Jim Harbaugh, was how they had to mortgage all of their weapons at receiver to go and try and get under the salary cap. They focused on offensive line in the draft here. How have they managed to find their way now to 4-2 and a team that looks like they could be a legitimate thorn in the side of a lot of folks in the AFC?
Yeah, I think this is the Harbaugh special. I mean, the other coach in another division who's leaning on the run. I called this when they first hired Jim Harbaugh was, those times when I played against them when they were in San Francisco 49ers, they were as physical as a team as you could find. And now it's a structural thing that they built, and this will take him time. But he's turning what was already in that locker room into a team that just you get more at bats in a more physical way, and there's less chances for mistakes. Justin Herbert's thriving in this environment. We've seen some of the best touch passes, accuracy of his career. And yeah, they lost bigger name receivers, but young guys like Quentin Johnston, Ladd McConkey, Palmer are stepping up, and Justin Herbert's having to do less overall the entire course of a game. I think they really had him dropping back 40, 50 times in the past, and it's like, give this guy a chance to be under center, lean behind a run game, and just take some shots down the field. And what they're doing is minimizing opportunities for mistakes. And he's growing into this moment. And I really like this team. Again, thorn in the side is a great way to put it. They're just going to be a team that doesn't make a lot of mistakes, be physical, and try to win in the trenches with attrition. And it could be a 1-2-3 score game, but that's a winning football formula. And we've seen that from Jim Harbaugh already.
And as the lone defender of the trio here, let me also say the defense leads the league in points allowed. They're giving up just a little over 13 points a game. So a major issue for this team in the past has become one of the strong points for this team, that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Jesse Minter came over, and for anyone that had concerns about the college coordinator coming to the NFL, a guy who had had some NFL exposure through the Harbaugh brothers, maybe we put those concerns to rest for the time being here. You guys can check out Marshall Newhouse, 6 o'clock Eastern on the pregame power up here on DraftKings Network, previewing both of these Monday Night Football games. Marshall, always appreciate the time, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, fellas.
It's been incredible what the Chargers have been able to pull off there. Coming up next, though, let's dip a toe in the college waters from this weekend. A resounding performance from the Georgia Bulldogs has us questioning everything in a season that may feature more parity than any we've seen in recent memory. Next on GoJo and Golic.
back to GoJo and Golic, Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. We had another excellent weekend in college football that shook up the AP Top 25 poll a little bit. So, Georgia's win over Texas vaults them up to number 2, Tennessee up to 7 as they beat Alabama, who falls all the way down to 15th. So, guys, big game for Tennessee, but the more impressive win here had to be the Bulldogs on the road in Austin, right?
Yeah, Dad, this becomes the most impressive win of the college football season so far, especially going and doing it on the road. And in the fashion that they did, Georgia's defense that we know going back to the first half of the Alabama game looked more vulnerable than it had in a while. This team clicked back. It's that old Buzz Lightyear line from stun to kill on Saturday night at DKR. I have not seen performances like that since the national championship Georgia defense, where they just looked so far ahead, Dad, of Texas physically. They looked so far ahead of Steve Sarkisian as a play caller in terms of dictating the terms based on not only Jalen Walker and this incredibly talented defensive team going out and the back end strapping them up, in the front end harassing them, Quinn Ewers behind a really good offensive line, but schematically, the things that they threw at them, especially on third down, had Steve Sarkisian calling plays and Quinn Ewers playing quarterback from his heels. So I'm as impressed with that Georgia defense as anything we've seen in college football this season. That was a masterful performance.
That was an incredible performance. Causing, 4 turnovers? Quinn Ewers lost 2 fumbles. Arch Manning came in and lost a fumble. Ewers threw an interception as well. They had 4 turnovers. By the way, Carson Beck threw 3 interceptions as well. But that Georgia defense was without question the story of the game. The pass interference call being reversed was a story for a bit in the game as well. Cost the fans in Texas the school $250,000 for all the water bottles they threw on the field for that interference call.
Yeah, they got fined similar to what we had after the Tennessee Ole Miss game a couple of years ago, where fans were pelting Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss with things on the field, got fined $250,000. Now they have to go through and use footage to identify the people that were throwing things and ban them from upcoming events. It's the exact same punishment. It's what people expected. And Dad, to the specifics of that situation, for a lot of people, and Kirby Smart kind of referenced this after the game, it felt like a cause and effect where people were worried about the message you send that if you just raise enough hell, we're going to change the call for you. In actuality, what the SEC and the officials said happened in that instance was, like we see in a lot of cases, referees can get together even after a flag is thrown initially, commiserate amongst one another, and decide, hey, we actually didn't see this the right way, we're going to pick up the flag, which is what they say happened there. But again, because of how this was rolled out, you now have a situation that looks more like cause and effect than I think it was intended to.
But I get them throwing the flag and talking, but they made the call. The ref made the call, made the penalty call, which then made the mob mentality water bottle throw on the field, which quite honestly gave the officials time to talk more about it. But that's one thing I hadn't seen, Mike. It's one thing when the flag gets thrown, the officials huddle and they change the call. But the referee made the call, made the penalty call. Then the time was to clean up all the water bottles. And then all of a sudden they reversed the call. That was the surprising thing to me. Kind of like when you get to the line before a team hustles to the line because they know a play might be replayed to run another play. Once you run another play, you can't replay the last game. I thought once the official made the call, and obviously I'm wrong, that was it, that they talk before the call is made. So that was a surprising thing to me.
It was horrifically legislated in the moment, and the officials there in part helped create an environment that now the SEC and everyone involved have to have a real strong hold on, because you don't want this to become a precedent, and that's why fining them and doing the things that they're going to do, I think it's warranted. There's no excuse for throwing stuff on the field.
Oh, yeah.
And if any of those fans get banned from an upcoming game, they have only themselves to blame. But
exactly right.
They absolutely made a mess of that, which is ironic, Dad, because they got the call right. Like, they absolutely got the call right. That should have been an interception. It should have been Texas's ball. I agree with it not being a flag on the play. And so all those things are true, but the how you do this stuff matters. Speaking of the how in this game, Dad, Do you believe that Steve Sarkisian has done anything to fracture that locker room or that will affect them going forward by going and throwing Arch Manning in when he did in this game?
Man, I was surprised that he did it for 6 passes. Arch was 3 of 6. Had the bad fumble, where he was getting chased just like Ewers was the entire game by that Georgia defense. I think the players will look at it as they were looking for a spark, looking to try and get a win. They were definitely out of sorts. I mean, Georgia just took it to them and definitely had Texas on their heels. So I believe the team got enough of a look at Arch when he had to start those couple of games that they said, oh, this kid's special. He's a hell of a quarterback. We could actually be in the same position if he started the entire year as well. So I think for those factors, I don't think that he's going to lose or fracture the locker room. I think that the team even realizes we have the best quarterback room in the country.
Yeah, he said after the game, I was just trying to settle Quinn down a little bit, trying to give us a bit of a spark. So we got to get out of our own way, not playing as a very good unit right now. I think as long as it's framed as, hey, Quinn, we're just going to give you a second to take a breath, because dude was drowning out there. Quinn Ewers wasn't seeing the picture the right way. That Georgia defense was dictating the terms. And so if it's framed like that, for a guy that's coming back off injury that didn't play his best football a week ago in Red River against Oklahoma, they were just better in every other conceivable way than that Sooners team that's going to struggle mightily with the quarterback situation there and the talent on offense. I don't think that's that big of a deal, Dad. I was surprised, though, just because the chances of Arch having success in those circumstances were so low. Yes, he played well while Quinn Ewers was out, but he was going into a game where a defense on the other side was firing all cylinders, presents schematically the most complicated picture that he was going to see, and talent-wise, certainly the best group he was going to see, and cold in the middle of the fray. So Arch Manning was done no favors, quite honestly, going into a situation where he had no chance in my mind of being successful.
I mean, Georgia, 7 sacks, and then obviously you multiply that for being chased and pressures and hits. You're right. He got thrown into the lion's den here without question. I get what Sark was thinking, because you have seen things out of Arch Manning that showed you he could play well, but he was in the most difficult situation, Arch Manning, I mean, that he has been in his young career of playing. Without question, he got thrown to the wolves here. So while I get Sark looking for the spark, I don't really know what the expectation level was going against this defense.
I don't either. So that side of the ball, again, I still think that when Quinn Ewers gets healthy, and you saw right in the second half, they had opportunities to make this a game. Like down towards the end, Texas offensively in the second half started to look a lot more like themselves. It was more of the creative play calling we had come to expect from Stark. They protected a little bit better in the second half. It was just too little too late after the hole they'd been put in. But Dad, right now, and listen, Texas's defense had been number one in a lot of categories coming into this game, so it wasn't like a slouch group that they went up against. But Carson Beck in this Georgia offense did nothing to really impress us. The defense was the story of this game. The Texas defense got constantly put in bad field position spots by some of the decisions made early on in this one. And so if I'm teams assessing this, Georgia's offense still presents an opportunity for other teams to find success against this Bulldog team. They have the loss against an Alabama team that's aging like sour milk now. But that defense, Dad, if they play that way in more of the games than not down the stretch, it's going to be hard to favor anybody against the Bulldogs from here on out.
So are they the best team in the SEC? Who's the best team? Georgia, Tennessee, LSU? How about Texas A&M? They're the lowest rank of that group. They have the toughest schedule left. They play both LSU. They play them next, I believe, and then they play Texas as well. So Texas A&M has the toughest schedule remaining of the top teams in the SEC, but they could have the most to gain. If they win those 2 games, they're going to be right there. Georgia has to play Tennessee. Texas plays Texas A&M at the end. That's kind of it for them. How do you rank the SEC now?
Georgia's the best team in the SEC right now. And I think after that, still probably have Texas in the mix with LSU and Texas A&M. LSU is the most interesting team to me at this point. Now, they have been so depleted by injury, especially in the middle of that defense, that I do worry about the depth of that side of the ball. A group in a defense that, going back to the Ole Miss game, has played well as of late, is actually doing a great job harassing the quarterback, playing cleaner football than they did last season. Texas A&M, we know the appeal of them, but I would say it's probably Georgia, Texas, and then LSU and Texas A&M, which brings us to the other game of the weekend that surprised a lot of people, Dad. Now, Tennessee is going to be in the mix in these conversations. Defensively, they have absolutely earned their way into that. Nico Iamaleava on offense, I think, still performed better than I expected in this game against Alabama. But this one really going to be about the Tide, Dad. 2 losses in a season before November for the first time since 2007 for Kalen DeBoer in year 1 of this team. Jalen Milroe and the offense look lost in the way that's probably the most surprising of anything, given what Kalen DeBoer came in here with as a strength, Dad. So with this Alabama team, Kalen DeBoer's job's not in any real threat at this point, but man, it's going to get stickier down there earlier than expected for this team and all that talent.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, what Kalen DeBoer is going to have to deal with down there from the fan side is going to be just brutal coming off of Nick Saban's tenure there. But we all thought with the 12-team playoff now, there's going to be a 2-loss team in there, right? Could Alabama be that 2-loss team? Their one major game left on the schedule is LSU, who's sitting there ranked 8th right now, but they play Texas A&M next. So depending on the outcome of that, you obviously have Georgia at number 2 and Tennessee at number 7. They play each other still. So one of those 2 teams is going to have 2 losses. We think there'll be a 2-loss team in the 12, and probably, if you were to make me guess, I would say it would probably be from the SEC, though the Big Ten may have something to say about that. Or maybe no 2-loss teams in, but we thought we'd finally get a 2-loss team in a 12 team. I do think it'll be an SEC team. Alabama obviously would have to run the table and still then probably wait and see. You know, I pretty much know they don't control their own destiny.
I think because we've seen blemishes to the SEC's top teams early, right? Now that Texas has fallen into that, Georgia lost to Alabama early on, Alabama after that Vanderbilt loss, there's been enough blood drawn early to where I think the supremacy, the almighty supremacy of the SEC, Dad, can probably be called into question enough to at least make that a conversation in a year where we don't know how the committee is going to respond to teams 11, 12, 13, 14 that are on the bubble of this and what's going to matter to them. Because again, back in the day, it used to be conference championships were a factor. Now they're an automatic qualifier. And once that's gone as a resume point, with the rest of the sample as cloudy as it is, I don't know what they're going to make of this. We've got the Big Ten right now with the majority of the top 5, even though we know Penn State's still got to play Ohio State, so there's some things that we don't know. Oregon seems firmly in control of their destiny at number 1, and so I don't know what they're going to do with Alabama, Dad, in this 12-team playoff era. They've got the opportunities, but now you look at these games, and after the losses that they've suffered, including, by the way, a game against South Carolina that could have easily gone the other way, on the road at LSU, like LSU's going to be favored in that game probably pretty substantially based on what we've seen. Oklahoma's defense is going to present some challenges for an Alabama offense that's been struggling. The Iron Bowl at the end of the season is always crazy. So, I mean, we could be dealing with a 3-loss Alabama team before it's all said and done based on how they've played, which is not well lately.
That would be something. That would be a tough start for Kalen there. And you mentioned the Big Ten. They have 3 teams in the top 10, but all 3 are in the top 4. Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State. Ohio State and Penn State play November 2nd. So you're either going to get a first loss for Penn State or a second loss for Ohio State. And could they be a 2-loss team that gets into the playoffs? But Penn State will have a chance, obviously, to prove itself very soon. Oregon, I believe, they take care of business, play the way they've been playing. They should be able to run the table in the regular season.
If we're doing this as a power ranking and not the AP poll ranking, I would have Penn State below Ohio State and Texas. They're there because they've got the goose egg in the loss column right now. They, to me, remind me more of Miami and Tennessee in terms of the quality of that team. They'll have the chance to prove it against Ohio State, but Oregon sitting at the top spot right now. I think it's them, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas that would be in that bunch for the 4 best teams in the sport. and then we could sort the rest out from there. We can talk more about the teams lurking in the distance. Iowa State still undefeated. Clemson working their way back into the top 10. BYU undefeated. And don't look now. Undefeated Indiana coming off a blowout of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. We'll have the full conversation about them at some point this week because they deserve it.
Cries foul. Bring it on, right? Bring it on, because this was stolen from us. Bring it on.
Right there it is. You heard Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeves' thoughts on how Game 5 of the WNBA Finals went down. She did not mince words. So a foul call to give the Liberty 2 free throws and force OT. Liberty end up pulling it out in OT, get the first championship in franchise history, but tough one for Lynx fans. And I mean, obviously a great series, but hard to see it come down to a call like that to decide it in the end.
Oh, boy, Dad, it really is insane when you look at this in totality, because on paper, in a year that has represented unprecedented growth for the WNBA across the board, that was manifest in the crowd that you saw at Barclays for this game. An incredible turnout, an insane atmosphere. You heard multiple players remark about looking around and taking in this environment that they had all helped build, and where the WNBA is culminating now in a championship game that went all 5 games in the series, that went to overtime in the final deciding Game 5 here, and ultimately saw the team that was one of the last remaining teams from the start of it, a team in the New York Liberty that won the first ever WNBA game, now 27 years after playing for the league's initial championship, went and found a way to get this done. This is going to be the story of the day. And Dad, understandably so. This is kind of what we do, especially in basketball, when you look at some of these judgment calls here at the end of this. So as Jesse mentioned, and as you heard from Cheryl Reeve, Brianna Stewart, who bricked 2 free throws that could have tied the game prior to this, gets a reprieve when she drives and gets a foul call that the Minnesota Lynx challenge. Did you think it was a foul on this one, Dad? And do you agree with Cheryl Reeve that they had this moment stolen from them?
Oh, there's no way that was a foul. I mean, I don't even care if you say swallow the whistle at the end and let him play a little bit. I don't even think in the first quarter that would be a foul. And it even went to review. They're going to say there was contact on the way up. I know, but you certainly didn't hit her in the arm. I was stunned they made that call. Stunned. And Stewie hits the 2, sends it to overtime. So Minnesota still does have a chance, right, in overtime. Sure. But, I mean, when you don't score your first points in a 5-minute overtime until 1:51 left in overtime, Kayla McBride hit a couple of free throws. That was the first time Minnesota scored in overtime. While I think it was a horrible call and the game should have been done, because that call happened with, 3.8 seconds left, would have been a Minnesota win. You still had a chance to win it in overtime, and you just obviously you scored 2 points, right? You lose. Minnesota or New York outscores them 7-2, I believe, in overtime, and your first 2 don't come till under 2 minutes to go. But that call, no. I mean, there's no way you make that call.
Yeah, I agree. It was a bad call in the moment. The replay and the amount of times we saw it also gave everyone time to see the very blatant missed traveling call. And I'm not usually the guy that's one to call travel when you got people driving. But when Stewie gets the ball and immediately moves the feet before she gets anywhere else, it kind of is too much to ignore in that situation. So I agree the call was a big-time miss. But like you said, there were other opportunities. And there were plenty of opportunities for the Lynx to win this, Dad, because the Liberty were flat-out awful shooting from their stars last night. Jonquel Jones gets 17 points in this game. She is your finals MVP for the New York Liberty. But you look at some of the names that have been big for them all along. Breanna Stewart is a former MVP. Sabrina Ionescu, who had been sensational throughout this postseason run. Overall, the Liberty in this game shot 30.6% of the field. And Sabrina Ionescu, I just mentioned, 1 of 19, finished with 5 points in this game. I give her credit, Dad, because every shooter knows you're going to hit a slump, and sometimes the only way to go is to power through it. But it got uncomfortable down the stretch of this game, watching her chuck up shots in key moments when it just wasn't going for them. So the Liberty are simultaneously, Dad, a team that deserve what they got. Were the best team in the WNBA for the vast majority of this season. And even in this series and in the lead up to it in this postseason run, looked incredible, but could not have limped harder to the finish line to ultimately lift the trophy that now, for so many of these players, the culmination of what we talked about, the battles with the Las Vegas Aces, this team coming together to try and do this. Breanna Stewart, who is a New York kid by nature and talked about how much this meant to her, but it was not a clean or fun win for them by any stretch of the imagination.
Ionescu, 1 of 19, you mentioned from the field goal, 1 of 10 from 3 points. Stewart, 4 of 15 field goals, 0 for 3. So they were 5 for 34, the two of them shooting. I mean, when you look for your stars to be big, they weren't. Obviously, Stewart missed a couple of free throws, but then made the 2 to send it into overtime, their first title in the 28 years. You're right. They kind of limped to the finish because as casual fans looked at this and kind of got up to speed on the two teams, I believe a lot of people thought Liberty were going to run away with this thing. But those in the know that Minnesota is a tough out. And as you mentioned, the 5 games, the last one went to overtime, so did the first one. The first game, there were 2 overtime games. You want to talk about probably a year too late. This would have been a great year to start, as next year the WNBA is going to best of 7. And because it was best of 5 this year, next year they go to best of 7. Who wouldn't want to see 7 games? And hopefully we would have got 7 games of this series. So maybe a year too late on that, because that would have been something.
Yeah, the further you get from this for Kathy Engelbert and the rest of the WNBA, the better it's going to age, because coming off of this season, having a finals where that was the refrain from most people was, I would take 7 of these right now if you sign me up for it. You get a team laden with stars, one of your original teams going at a time where growth has been huge for the WNBA. So congratulations to the New York Liberty. Congratulations to Ellie, one of the best mascots in all of sports. But Dad, last night also was a big win for the YouTube multi-view crowd, because they debuted the multi-view that had the WNBA Finals Game 5. They had the Sunday Night Football matchup between the Jets and the Steelers, and also had the Dodgers punching their ticket to the World Series queued up there now. And you want to talk about a matchup that casual fans, the commissioner's office, really everyone involved is going to savor. Dodgers-Yankees set for the World Series. The first time we've had a matchup of two 50-home run hitters from the regular season in Aaron Judge and in Shohei Ohtani. Two teams chock full, and that were the best teams in Major League Baseball all year. We talked, Dad, about how difficult that is in this sport. Major League Baseball got exactly what they were, I'm sure, hoping for in quiet places. And so is this a matchup that everyone should be excited about, Dad? This has one of those, is it good for baseball feels to it that we're getting Dodgers-Yankees in the World Series?
Oh, yeah, and hitting will be, while obviously pitching is unbelievably important, it's going to be, the hitting of Ohtani and Stanton, who just hits dingers against Cleveland, and Judge. I mean, not only home run hitters, but mountainous men. So people love to see dingers, and they love to see big guys hit them, and you're going to get it. Or you're probably going to get it in this series, or at least that's what it's set up to. So, but you're right. In the quiet places of Major League Baseball offices, they have to be ecstatic that they got this matchup of the Yankees and the Dodgers. The Dodgers with the payroll of where it would have been an absolute tragedy and disappointment had they not at least gotten to the World Series, let alone win it. And then the Yankees, they're the Yankees. People love them or hate them. They're just one of the most talked about franchises of all time. So people will watch it because they'll want to see them get beat, and people will watch it because they want to see them win. Either way, people are going to watch and tune into this series.
Yeah, I understand some people being jaded by the fact that these big payrolls are the ones making it to the game. But in terms of something that's harder in Major League Baseball than any other sport, getting the most stars to produce in the biggest moments, these two teams have a knack for it. You look, the MVPs in both of these LCS series, kind of emblematic, these championship series, kind of emblematic of what went on. Giancarlo Stanton, your MVP of the ALCS, he had 3 straight games with a home run, and all came with 2 strikes. His 16th home run in 36 career postseason games passes Aaron Judge and Babe Ruth for the 3rd most in Yankees career history. Juan Soto with one of the more sensational at-bats you'll ever see for that 3-run shot in the 10th inning to send them to the World Series. And on the other side, Dad, you look at kind of what the Dodgers have overcome, that roster they put together, ravaged by injury, and Tommy Edman ends up as your NLCS MVP, guy that was a midseason acquisition at the trade deadline from St. Louis, ends up becoming huge for them as they basically trot out 2 pitchers and then go to the bullpen around this lineup bolstered by some phenomenal hitting, including Mr. October himself, Kike Hernandez, and the job that he's done. So there is a ton to be excited about this series, and I know we got to wait all the way till Friday. We'll spend plenty of time talking about it and previewing it this week because this is as box office as anything we'll have in the world of pro sports this season, far and away. Congratulations to them, and congratulations to YouTube TV. We'll finish with this, that, and third next. right, guys, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick ones to send you into the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review our show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. And if you miss us there live or any of our great guests, shout out to Marshall Newhouse, our friend, former NFL offensive lineman, and one of the co-hosts of the pregame Power Up, 6 p.m. Eastern, Mondays and Thursdays on the DraftKings Network. You can catch that wherever you get our podcast or right here as soon as we get done on YouTube. And guys, let's start off with this. The Detroit Lions, as we mentioned, got a huge win over the weekend. Not surprising. That's kind of been par for the course for them the last couple of years in the Dan Campbell era. But we know the game balls have become somewhat of a fascination for people after Dan Campbell famously forgot to give Jared Goff the game ball after he went 18 for 18 and pitched the perfect game a few weeks ago. And so Dan Campbell now making even more of a show of this in the Lions locker room. Here was this locker room, the game ball given out after the most recent win against the Vikings.
All right, man, Mr. Bates! Where's Bates at? Get up here, Bates! Give the man his ball! Give the man his ball!
Hey, how about the offense getting us in position, man? With like a minute and a half left, getting down there, man. We trust you guys with everything. And then field goal line, man. I know that's like the worst job in the world. I really appreciate you guys. And then Hogan and Jack, man.
He won his stats. He won the game.
Jake Bates, who is now 10 for 10 on field goals in the seasons, 20 of 21 on extra points. He signed with the Lions in June after he had a big season for the Michigan Panthers in the UFL, where he had 3 field goals of 60-plus yards, Dad. He was the SEC Kicker of the Year in the Southeastern Conference Kicker of the Year in 2022 at Arkansas, but it had trouble getting to this point now. So a huge outing for him, and I'm glad he admitted that being on the field goal blocking team is the worst job in sports.
Oh, yeah, without question. It's the worst job in sports. Just to get run over, I was an end on that and would have to try and stop the guy that came in between the end and the wing and a guy trying to hit me as well. It's a horrible, horrible situation. But the kid, I tell you what, he's perfect, as you mentioned, kicked in the XFL or USFL, whichever it is. Kind of like Brandon Aubrey, who kicked for the Birmingham Stallions and never kicked at Notre Dame, a kicker for Dallas. But that's the position that gets swapped around the most in the offseason and certainly during the season, where you're basically 1 or 2 bad kicks away from being on the waiver wire and 1 or 2 bad kicks from somebody for you getting called off the couch and then you get like a limited chance to prove yourself to whether you're going to get they hang on to you or not.
And this is a guy, Jake Bates said after this game, 18 months ago, I thought I was through with football. I was selling bricks back in Houston.
Yeah.
I thought the dream was dead. So the guy came from selling bricks to now going out and making kicks for this team that, Dad, I don't know about you watching this Dan Campbell-led Lions team. Every time I see footage from the inside or an interaction between a player and coach or anything, any player who's ever laced him up or strapped him up has to look at this team and be jealous that you didn't get a chance to be in this locker room, because it seems like one of the healthiest locker room cultures I've ever seen.
He just seems like a guy you love to play for. And I go back again to the initial press conference when he talked about biting kneecaps and the physicality and how players who were on the team had to be going, oh my God, training camp's going to be so hard. We're going to be hitting. And what their initial thought of was this former huge player talking all this toughness, but the best thing that can happen is you get players to buy into what a coach is saying. And the best way to buy in is to see results on the field. And you're getting the results on the field for a team that had been so without results for such a long time. So that helps you buy in even more. But they love this guy. I mean, you're right. The continuity and the kumbaya singing that I say doesn't happen in all locker rooms. It's about as close as togetherness as you're going to find in the NFL.
A team that put a lot of that work in when they still weren't winning games early in Dan Campbell's tenure, when they were losing a bunch of those close ones. Now seeing the payoff of that, of time, patience, and the right mix of people there. Jesse, let's get to that. More Tom Brady in the media for us here in various forms and fashions.
Yeah, obviously we've been talking a lot about his career as a broadcaster, but we got him in a different light on the Fox pregame show. He was getting ready to call a game, but they beamed him into the studio, okay? So this is some real, hologram, AI. I don't even know how you do this kind of technology. Brady's already got a little bit of a reputation. I don't know, people on the internet like to call him a robot. Now they're beaming him into the studio like a real robot. I don't know, did we like the look? What do we think of it? My question is, can we get this technology so I can do the show from home and you guys can beam me into this studio?
See, that's eventually where this is going to lead. Sports media is looking at this and the opportunities it presents. I'm sure Kirk Herbstreit and the College Game Day folks are going to be next after how many places we saw him en route to call that game, beaming in from the private jet. Dad, it was clean the way they pulled it off. Like, I am impressed at how good it looked, at least from the footage that I saw of this. But the overall, like, I have been less critical of Tom Brady than most because I think that he's going to end up being fine at this, and that a lot of this just happens to be, hey, he's with the A crew now, and he's coming off a guy in Greg Olsen people liked a lot. But it is amazing the media push that we've gotten. Watching all of the commercials that Fox has made for Tom Brady calling these games as if he's the star of the show is a fascinating bit of PR strategy that's been really weird to watch.
Yeah, it has been weird to watch because we haven't seen it before. But again, we haven't seen a lot of things that Brady has done before with all the Super Bowls that he's won. So it's not shocking that they would put in the money they're giving him, put into the production to have him there. And this is old hat, this beaming up. I mean, you guys won't know about it, but people my age will. This is Star Trek with Captain Kirk and the engineer Scotty.
Beam me up, Scotty.
Beam me up, Scotty. I mean, this goes way back. This is nothing new. They're stealing from Star Trek, beaming Tom Brady up to this. I mean, come on. This is my era stuff right now.
This is like what people imagined when you told them about the future 20 or 30 years ago, that we would have hologram Tom Brady on the set. I want to be there for the meeting where they explain this to Terry Bradshaw, though. That had to be incredible, trying to get Terry on board with all this. In general, the Fox NFL set, like, you've got Strahan and some of those guys. But for Terry, like Howie Long, I want to know what it was like sitting down in a meeting, because I can only imagine what it would be like with you, Dad, if we on the show all of a sudden did explain to you, hey, Jesse's actually going to beam in for the show today. We're going to go hologram Jesse that we'll toss to at the beginning of this segment and be on our merry way. Speaking of someone that seems like they could very really incorporate hologram technology into their show soon, let's talk about the Eras Tour in the third, Jesse.
Yeah, so Taylor Swift resumed her Eras Tour in Miami this past weekend. She started the tour in March of last year, going strong. Lots happened in that time for this woman, a fan. 2 pregnancies, okay? So here she is, pregnant with her second baby as she hit Miami night 1. She was pregnant with her first baby when she was at, I believe it was Gillette for the first show. Yeah, Gillette, she was 37 weeks pregnant. Now she's 18 weeks pregnant in Miami. I need somebody to do this math for me and figure out how soon after she gave birth to the first baby did she get pregnant with the second baby.
It is mind-numbing to sort of think about there, Dad. The dedication, though, on her part, that's a grinder. Being able to get out there, because, Dad, you didn't get to experience the Eras Tour, but it is not for the faint of heart. Kyle Long, our buddy and former NFLer, was at the concert in Tampa night 1 with his wife and said he was, like, gassed by the end of this. Most guys that we've seen, J.J. Watt, the first one, come away amazed at what an endurance sport this concert is. So for that woman to do it pregnant not once but twice, my hat's off to her.
Jesse, you would be impressed to know my wife pulled this off. Mike was 6 months old when she was pregnant with Jake. So this would have been within this time frame of this tour. She was 6 months old when she found out she was pregnant with Jake. And there were some tears of joy and tears of, oh, my God, I'm pregnant again. Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, God, a superhero, because I can't imagine.
No, pregnant women, all of you out there, actual superheroes among us now, including this woman here. We can get into the reputation theories. The other day, we've got a new outfit for that section of the show here, gold snakes instead of red snakes, maybe a symbol of Travis and the effect that her love has had. Bo Allen getting mistaken for Kylie Kelsey in a way that Kylie had a lot of good fun with there. Grainy footage, people mess things up here, and we mess things up here all the time. Let us know. Download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Critique us if you must. Check us out on the DraftKings Network, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern every day. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.